Hello, everyone. This is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I want to tell you about a new podcast out called Falls Count Anywhere. It is a classic pro wrestling podcast that brings you the legends of wrestling with true wrestling fans Chris DiCarlo and Charlie Turner. They bring on guests that are legends in this business, and as well as wrestlers of today, promoters, referees, you name it, they have them on there, folks. And I encourage you to listen to them. If you're on YouTube, watch them. They drop every Saturday. They have their podcast. They drop it in the afternoon. So look forward to that podcast coming out. Falls Count Anywhere podcast with Chris DiCarlo and Charlie Turner. Folks, you will not be disappointed. I guarantee it. And enjoy the podcast. Joining another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. Today's a special day for all of us here, a sad note, and I'm going to bring in Mr. George Schire to talk more about it. George, come on in. We good?
We are good, Brian.
All right.
We're good. Hey, man, we're coming together here kind of on the spur of the moment on this one. And, over the years, we've had to say goodbye to some of our heroes, our legends, the guys that brought us so much entertainment and gave so much of themselves during their careers. Mm-hmm. And yesterday, as we are doing this today, we lost definitely someone who, very interesting character in the wrestling business. He had his detractors. He had people that liked him. They had people that didn't like him. And Ole was Ole. You'll hear about that. But a contribution to professional wrestling that just can't go unnoticed. And as I was digesting this last night, Brian, it always means a lot to me because all of these guys, they were my childhood heroes. Mm-hmm. And I started to think about, I want to pay tribute to him like I do all of the guys that we've had leave us. Yeah. And I put a call out to someone that I felt could be of help to us and assist us in this. And it was none other than Luscious Larry Hynemi, a.k.a. Luscious Lars Anderson. And I was surprised. Larry is taking time out of his schedule, and he has agreed to come on with us. Larry, I want to bring you in here. And in advance,
there he is.
In advance, thank you so much for this sort of impromptu coming on with us. But Ole Anderson, you knew him, you worked with him, you wrestled him, you teamed with him, and maybe you want to just start off by giving us a little bit about some of your thoughts on Ole.
On Ole, well, he was actually a mastermind in the industry in terms of booking. I mean, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, but he was a mastermind in terms of booking in the industry. So one of the great legends, the legends of all time in this business.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I heard about Ole from a few people, one of them is Cowboy Bill Watts. And I know you're familiar with Bill Watts during your career. Bill Watts said that there were 4 promoters, 4 people in the business back in the kayfabe era that he thought were the best. One of them was Roy Schire out in California. The other one was Eddie Graham in Florida. And then there was Ole Anderson. And and Vern Gagne was the other one. Those were the men that Bill had mentioned. And it dawned on me when he said this that I think, and maybe you can allude to this, Larry, all of these promoters that he mentioned, including himself, they were a lot alike in character and how they approached the business. And they did all have good minds for the wrestling business.
Yeah, that is true. You know, like I worked for all of them actually. I worked for Vern. Vern trained me. I worked for Roy Shires. He was a bit of a piece of work. And Eddie
I've
Graham
heard,
worked with Eddie Graham.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick Roy Shires story. You know, like
Yes.
he had this girlfriend. She was some kind of a model, Nikki Garcia or something like that. I forget what her last name was. Anyway, Playboy model. And he had given her a diamond ring and then, you know, like decided that he didn't want to get divorced and somehow got it back from her, you know, and like they did the television at Channel 44 in Sacramento. And she had a truck, you know, back up to the back door where the ring would come out and put a dump about 2 tons of horse shit on the back.
Okay.
That's my horse life.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson. Fans of the AWA, you are in for a real treat. My friend Joyce Poston has just released her book titled My Ringside Seat to the AWA. Joyce writes about her personal experiences with wrestlers such as Nick Bockwinkel, Lord Alfred Hayes, Baron Von Raschke, and others. Joyce also has published many photos from her collection that you will not see anywhere else. Order today by email at joyce.poston@gmail.com. Payment is through PayPal. The book is only $20 plus $6 shipping and handling. International orders, please email Joyce for shipping charge. Folks, run, don't walk to your keyboard, and order today. And enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. Well, you know, Larry, you mentioned, of course, you and Ole, you both started with Vern Gagne. I got your start in the business through his training and coming into the AWA. You, of course, in 1965, 66 timeframe, and Ole came around in 1967, which by that time, if my memory serves me correctly, usually it does, you were already gone. You had went down south, and
Right,
you and Gene Anderson had left.
right.
Uh, and you and I on our last podcast here on Bumps and Thumps, we talked about how you and Gene, uh, basically when you first broke into the business here in the AWA, you and Gene wrestled each other a number of times around the AWA circuit, and I would assume those were a lot of training matches.
Pretty
That
much training, yeah.
Yeah, and
But
then you both left and you went down south, and somehow Larry Heinemi disappeared, and we got Luscious Lars Anderson, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew.
right.
Let's talk about how that started, and then maybe if you can transition into us how Ole came in later, because he came down, I think, about 68.
Right.
So
Okay.
share that with
Well,
us.
I worked with Gene probably 25 or 30 times in wrestling matches.
Yeah.
And the way it came about, you know, like I wanted to go on the road, you know, and he wanted to go on the road, and he was like helping Vern train me.
Yeah.
And I think I've told this story before, you know, like Vern booked us in Nashville, Tennessee
Oh, yeah.
with
Goulas?
Goulas, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I graduated from college, I bought a new, like 64 Oldsmobile convertible, you know, like there I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and, you know, like they were sending us out into these various towns, and, Gene paid trans, paid a couple bucks, for the gas, and have a couple other guys in the cars to pay the gas to get there. It was the most miserable experience that I've ever had in my life. They sent us out one day. They sent us out one day, as a medics, put masks on and sent us somewhere up in Hazard County, Kentucky. Anyway, we're winding up. Where the hell is this place? Finally, we get there. It's way, I don't know where, somewhere in Kentucky. Anyway, Gene and I are in the ring as the medics, and like I told Gene, I said, take a look at that sheriff over there. You know, like there's a sheriff, you know, like we got plenty of heat. I mean, there was a sheriff pointing the gun at us, you know, the sheriff by the locker room door pointing a gun at us, you know. I said, gee, what the hell? Let's get this thing over with. Let's get out of here, you know. So that was one of the experiences with Nick Poulos. And anyway, we called Vern up and said, you know, I made about $60 or $70 a week, or I don't know. It was like ridiculous, you know. So I called Vern up, and he booked us with Jim Crockett in North Carolina, and we were getting over very well as a team. We wanted to, you know, like advance a little bit, so they sent us down to Georgia, and Jim Crockett had said, you know, like if he had spent the money on us that he had on another team, you know, we'd be a championship team there. So anyway, we went to Georgia, and from Georgia then about 6 months, and then back to Atlanta. And from that point on, we were on top all over.
Yeah.
So that was the history of that. And then when it gets to Ole,
Wrestling fans, promoters, wrestlers, and anyone who enjoys pro wrestling now have something new to be excited about. The Wrestling Fans International Association, the WFIA, is back. WFIA is an association that exists to promote, grow, and support professional wrestling throughout the world. Membership is free. Your membership includes a free digital bi-monthly publication of the Wrestling Fan News newsletter, association updates, voting privileges, and much more. Please go to thewfia.org, that's THEWFIA.org, and become a member today.
You know, Ole and I, Ole had been playing football in Colorado, you know, University of Colorado or Colorado State, one of the two. And in the summertime, they took, you know, like they had sheds up in the mountains. They got sanctioned for it by the NCAA. But, you know, like they had sheds up in the mountains, it was hot as hell, you know, tin roofs, and they were practicing year round, you know. So Ole ended up with a concussion and lost his scholarship there, decided not to go there. Anyway, he would then have transferred to St. Cloud State, where I was playing football and wrestling. And he was in a fraternity, you know, and I was a jock. And he, you know, like the Crusher was a famous wrestler in that area.
Yeah.
And he would, you know, come out, you know, in the mall, you know, outside of the main building, you know, flex his arms and, you know, do the Crusher imitation. So ended up, I don't know how it ever ended up, but we ended up selling out Eastman Hall, which was a small hall, you know, at that time, you know, only about 3,000 people in it. You know, like for a wrestling match, you know, the jocks against a fraternity, you know, so he and I ended up wrestling in the main event, you know, like at that time, you know, so it was kind of very interesting go around. He later came on the wrestling team, you know, and we wrestled together in college. And he didn't play football because he already had the concussion, which later, many years later, I'll go get back to this part, but many years later, he had Meniere's disease, you know, like, and his equilibrium would be off. He would like stumble in the ring. I mean, it was like really, you know, really did a number on him, the concussion. But anyway, I was back for a homecoming, you know, like I played in the homecoming, not the homecoming game, but the old timers game against the varsity, you know, and like Vern had started him at that time, and I knew that. And I happened to be driving in Minneapolis, and I saw him, you know, walking down the street by the wrestling office, you know, so I pulled over and talked to him, and, you know, I said, look, you know, we could bring in, you know, he's wanted to move, you know, get into business, you know, into more than a single or whatever, you know, advance. So in any event, you know, like I said, we can bring you in as a third brother, you know, so we sold the office in Georgia, in North Carolina on the fact of bringing in the third brother, you know, and like, they said, yeah, okay. So he gets off the plane in Charlotte, and he says, "So what's my name?" I says, "Well, you're Ole." What? I just said, "You're Ole Anderson." But anyway, I don't know if I told you the story before of how with Sailor Thomas and then. So
Oh,
did
go
I?
ahead, share it.
Go ahead,
Just
yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway, like the introduction, Ole's introduction was, we were Becker and Weaver were the top team, top babyface team. We were the top heel team at that time,
Mhm.
working on Raleigh television, they did the television in Raleigh, and then Bicycle did all of Norfolk and all of.
Right.
So in any event, like we're Gene and I are getting the upper hand on Becker and Weaver, and they're making a little bit of a comeback, and out from behind the curtain comes Ole Anderson. I never seen him. We never said anything about a third brother or anything like that. All of a sudden, here he comes out, and he's stomping the hell out of everybody, and then out of the other curtain comes Sailor Art Thomas, like Ole's flying over the top rope. I'm flying over the top rope, and Gene's, I don't know if Ole knew how to fly over the top rope at that time, but anyway, we sold out everywhere.
Yeah.
Like it was right on going into the summer, and it was a black audience mostly, but I mean, huge stadiums, that
Yeah.
we sold out all summer long. So in any event, that's
I used to get the programs from Gene Gordon. Do you remember Gene Gordon?
I do,
Who was
yeah,
the photographer?
right.
He was him and I were exchanging programs back in those days. He'd send me the ones from down there and I'd send him the Twin Cities. We did that for a lot of years. So I was well aware of what you guys were up to and doing and
Yeah,
able to follow it. One of the things that we should share about Alan Rogowski, before we
right.
go on with Ole, because they're one and the same, folks. But I thought it was interesting when Al Rogowski broke into the wrestling business here in the AWA. He actually appeared on his first Minneapolis card, and it was August of 1967, and he actually was unannounced on the card. He wasn't mentioned. He showed up in one of the low preliminary matches, and he was introduced as being possibly related to the Crusher and the Bruiser. Back
Right.
in that day, you may recall that Crusher and Bruiser were billed as cousins, and that was the first billing. And in the program, I do have a program from '67. They have a picture of Al Rogowski with the name Brute Rogowski on the program picture. And then it came back later, and Ole told me this. He said Vern changed it from Brute to Rock because he didn't want to have a problem with the Bruiser, Dick the Bruiser, who often was referred to as the Brute from here in, different places. But the bottom line was Rock Rogowski. So he was reportedly related to the Crusher and the Bruiser. Well, he went to Omaha in 1970-ish, 71. I think he was home and going to Omaha regularly and getting quite the push there. He was Rock Rogowski. And now he was reported to be the Bruiser's nephew. And that's the way he was introduced in Omaha. So I always thought it was interesting. He had the Bruiser connection, but then, down in the South, he discovered he had two brothers. And this was what was so great about pro wrestling. If you needed a scorecard, and it was so much fun for me back in those days. But when he left, well, while he was here, he had gotten a really good push for a time right after coming out of Vern's camp, because he joined up with Cowboy Bill Watson, a tag team, and they actually had some really good matches around the horn with Harley Race and Hardboiled Haggerty, who were a team at the time, and also with the AWA tag champs at the time were Mitsu Arakawa and Dr. Moto. And Watson, Rogowski had matches with both of them around the horn. So all of a sudden he was gone. And that's when, of course, he started showing up in the South. How long was it when Ole came in that you decided to come home here to Minnesota?
Probably about a year and a half,
Okay,
something like
yeah.
that.
And that was your idea, right?
That
You
was
wanted
my
to come
idea.
home?
Yeah, I wanted to. I was starting tag team wrestling, and wanted to, wrestle as a single.
Yeah.
Ended up in more tag teams later on.
Well, I was going to say you did end up coming here, and you kind of replaced Harley Race as Larry Hennig's partner.
Right. Yeah.
I think it was December of '69. You had been in a 6-man with Larry and Harley, and Harley was just gone after that, and you and Larry were together. You and Larry Hennig were together. But hey, as a singles, let's not forget that you did great in a great program against Cowboy Bill Watts, and
Sold out everywhere.
yeah, it was a tremendous. You had that TV angle where you were going to share each other's hold on one another. His Oklahoma Stampede and your hydrogen bomb. I remember you called it the suplex or whatever it was.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, very good feud. So you're home here. You did go back though and work with Ole down there, Ole and Gene.
I did. I was living in Aspen. I was sort of retired from the wrestling industry.
Mm-hmm.
I had a national t-shirt store company, lived in
Yep.
Aspen, Colorado, and went down. Started out as one summer, and then they booked me, but it was a little bit, like he was running a business for Jim Barnett at that time. He was the booker, he was the main booker. Gene was an assistant, but like Ole was the one that called the shots. So anyway, that worked out for a while, but then it stopped working out.
For a while there, you actually had a brother versus brother program
right?
going on.
Yeah, we had.
And I think you were the baby face, right?
Yeah. So that was sort of that was the beginning of the end, of working with Ole at that time. So we did the axe handle match, and the Omni. I was history out of there. So
I wanted to ask you a quick question, Larry, if I could. When Ole's, he's like George said, he's one of the smartest guys in the business as far as booking. When he was getting ready to do the Four Horsemen thing, were you ever contacted like, hey, we'd like you to come in?
no,
No? I thought
I was history at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, bringing you back in to the fold for a little while, like getting the group started. I mean, they had a great group, the original four, but I'm saying I didn't know if they had said, hey, Larry, we want you to come in, maybe do 6 months. And then, we'll finish the storyline.
What had happened at that point it was history.
Mm-hmm.
And the history was, we'll get to it, but I had where the hell this works? Let's see. Some of these things gotta take slow.
All right. Take your time.
Anyway.
Hey, I forget I ate breakfast sometimes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to, Ole was not, he was easy to work with, but not easy to work with,
Right.
Yeah.
Easy to work with if you did things his way, but if you want to do your own way, So anyway, I said, the hell with this, thank you, Ole, but, I'm going to, you'll move on. So I bought some tapes, some couple $100 worth of the 2-inch tapes, made some interviews, went to Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I was there one night, and I said, the hell with this. I'm not working with these guys, So anyway, I'm there. My wife at that time was in New York, so I went to New York, I said, the hell with this, so Ole said, what happened? I said, well, I said, I just can't, I just can't work with these people, so he said, well, Lars, he said, I'll tell you the truth, you're totally unemployable. You can't ever work in the business again,
Wow.
so I said, well, that's fine too, so
Yeah.
then about 2 days later, I get the call from the Florida office, and Johnny Valentine wants you to come in and be the booker. I mean, not be the booker, but, work. I said,
Yeah.
Ole, don't you remember? I'm unemployable.
That's
So
great.
anyway, they sent me a ticket, and 2 days later I'm working in Florida
Yeah.
and doing pretty well actually. And
Was Ole the booker down there at that time?
no, he came back and forth, but he was not the booker.
Okay.
He was not the booker. Johnny Valentine was the booker, and what he needed, Johnny Valentine needed somebody at that point to pound on people the way he pounded on people in the industry.
Sure.
Yeah.
So he set a whole different standard of the way he worked.
Yeah.
So I come in.
And he was out of the business because of the plane crash.
Because of the plane crash.
Yeah.
So in any event, I'd bring my bag in the locker room and say, okay, what do we do? And he'd say, well, we're going to go 35 minutes, you're going to do 40 minutes, and don't let him do it. So the guys didn't like working with me at that point. I mean, it was like, you take Rocky Johnson, high flyers, and, they can't do their style of work at all,
Right.
They hated it, but I mean, it was like, it wasn't so easy on me either because you hit the guy as hard as you can and he's going to hit you back. Pedro Morales, he made me deaf partially in one ear, hit me so many times a year. But in any event, it was like, it was getting to the point, where the people were believing it was so believable, that they say this guy is like real. I don't know about this other guy. This guy is real. So,
Well, and the thing is, I think we should always, because a lot of people that will watch this weren't around in the days that you and Gene and Ole were definitely a force in the business. But I can attest to the fact that all three of you were real in your delivery. The fans, they believed, and that was the whole name of the game.
Yeah, that was the whole,
Yeah.
So in any event, I was like Florida champion, and we, worked.
I remember that
for about 6-7 months or whatever it was, a year that it was there, and then got into a situation in a match in Jacksonville, before it was Don Morocco in it. I forget who else. Don Morocco, Dusty Rhodes, I forget Carl Cox or whatever. Killer Cox.
Yeah.
So Valentine says, "Well, Lars, you're going to do the favor tonight." I said, "Well, you know what, Johnny? If Dusty can't do it, and this guy can't do it, and so and so can't do it, I can't do it either." So of course that was, because I was just, having a bit of an issue with the office, and so of course I was fired.
Did you ever wonder what could have been with the AWA had things gone differently? Had their fortunes gone differently? Had certain wrestlers not left and perhaps more money would have been at the disposal of the Gagnes? Well, wonder no further. You can go to Brad Drake's YouTube channel and experience the 1987 Supermod for yourself, as Brad Drake starts off in May 1987 along with Greg Gagne, Baron von Raschke, Vern Gagne himself, Nick Bockwinkel, Larry Zbyszko, Kurt Hennig, and a slew of others as he plays and saves the AWA.
So there I am the next day. I go to the office, pick up my money, thank you, blah, blah, I'm gone. So where am I going to go? I said, well, where are you going, Lars? I don't know. I'm just going back to Colorado. So anyway, about 5 minutes later, you know, the office calls me, you know, Ole wants you to come back to Georgia. You know, so of course, you know, they want, for, you know, because Barnett owned part of Florida, he owned Georgia. Yeah, it's pretty, you know, they want me back. You know, they just fired me, but now they want me back. So anyway, I went back, went to Georgia, and of course that's when, you know, the office, you know, I came in and blah blah, and I'm working some of the towns, and then, you know, I see what they're going to try to do with it. They're bury me, you know. So I said, hell with this, you know. So I bought a ring and had one made, started my own company.
Yeah.
You know, and that sort of was the end of dealing with Ole Anderson.
When you talk about dealing with Ole, you know, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people over the years is that Ole, and you already alluded to this, Ole could be he could be good to get along with, and he could be bad to get along with, and sometimes it was his way or the highway. I've heard people describe him as he was a grumpy old man, an ornery old man. But one of the things that I always take out of that is that I'd like to think that everybody knew where they stood with Ole. He wasn't one of those people that you had to guess. Would you, is that how you would see it working around it?
Well, let's put it this way, you know, like, my phone's ringing. But in any event, you know, like, he was running a business for Barnett.
Mm-hmm.
It was strictly business. You know, like for example, when I started my own company, you know, he had to book my top guys, you know, and squash them on television because he was running a business. You know,
Right.
I had T-shirt stores all over the country.
Yeah.
And they thought that I was you know, attempting to take over the wrestling business, you know, so with my own company, which I probably would have if it had succeeded at that point, you know. Like, that's where my head was at, you know, fucking.
Yeah.
As the years went on, I know you ended up promoting in Hawaii, of course.
Right.
And then as the years went on, did you and Ole remain? I mean, did you talk to one another from time to time, or?
It sort of when the final chapter there in Georgia. After that, I talked to him at the you know, at the various conventions and so forth.
Okay.
You know, it was like it was your Ole.
How was the relationship from your vantage point between Gene and Ole? Did they always connect well?
I think they did, yeah. Yeah, they did, you know.
And you too, I assume you and Gene got along. Is
So
that?
we developed a style, you know, a
Yeah.
particular
Oh
style,
yeah.
you know, and the team style, and Ole fit right into that team style, and he and Gene had a good relationship.
Yeah. You know, it's one of the things when we look back at old tag teams from the 60s into the early 70s, I always say if anyone leaves the Anderson brothers, whatever combination that we want to use, Gene and Lars, or Lars and because you teamed with Ole too,
Right.
individually for a little bit.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever combination you want to use, if you leave the Anderson brothers, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, out of the equation, then the list is bogus, because you guys did. And I like the way you described, you developed that. You used to kind of divide the ring. You split the ring off and kind of kept working over your opponents. And it was something that most other teams weren't doing.
Yeah, we developed that style. I mean, it was our own particular style, and, you know, worked very well. You know, like, you know, for example, when Gene and I, before Ole came in, but when Gene and I worked with the Scott brothers, you know, and we sold out Greenville, South Carolina, like 26 or 27 Mondays in a row.
I remember that went on for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, you guys, I don't think you and Ole were ever against the Torres brothers.
No.
No. Okay.
Gene and I.
Yeah, Gene and you. Other memories.
The Scott brothers I was talking about.
Yep, George and Sandy. George and Sandy. I always loved it when I found out that Sandy's real name was Angus. It just struck
I
me
never
funny.
knew that.
That's true. It was Sandy's real first name was Angus Scott.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, there you learn something new. Well, we should point out too that, you know, Ole, of course, did become one of the great bookers in the business.
Oh, totally.
And as you said, one of the great minds. He was around at a time when, you know, working storylines and angles and different things were so important, and he knew how to do it.
Right, exactly.
And I mean, I think that's the secret. And, you know, we hear, and when I say we hear people, you hear them having distractors, whatever you want to use the word. Sometimes the best bookers, and Gagne fits in there, and Bill Watts fits in there, and Eddie Graham and Roy Schire. Sometimes the best ones are the ones that take the most criticism. And yet, if you look at their promotions, they were always at the top.
Yeah, you're gonna take a lot of heat, you know, like, because it's like you have to be able to totally manipulate, you know, like see the story and manipulate, and you know, it's like you're working with, you know, egos, but in some cases, very fragile egos in the industry. You know, like you get them to mold into, you know, convince him to go the way he wanted to go, you know, the way they wanted to go.
Did you ever read Ole's book?
I don't think I have. No.
It's Inside Out by Ole Anderson, How Corporate America Destroyed Professional Wrestling. It's a very, very good read. It's been out. What year did we do this here? 2003. So it's been out 11 years or 20 years almost. 20. Yeah. But I encourage people, and Larry, if you haven't got a copy and you're interested, this is a good book. One thing I'll tell you about it, you're going to see Ole as Ole was. You're going to like him, you're going to hate him, and it's a great book. So I'm putting a plug out for it because I think if it's still out there, it is a good read. And you've got many mentions in the book. Ole talks about a lot of his time with you and Gene, and of course, Vern Gagne and all the guys that he worked around. So here's a plug for Ole Anderson's Inside Out book.
I'll check it out.
What else? What else you want to share with us about this? He's a legend. We got to give him that credit.
He is a legend. I mean, he was, in terms of, you know, like Gagne, and he said Shires and so forth, Eddie Graham, he would fit into that mold. He fit into that particular mold, but he was a little bit stiffer than the other, in terms of, you know, he was a little more abrupt. Let's put it that way.
Let me ask you this:
very undiplomatic at times.
At times, yeah. Let me ask you this: in your career, of the different promoters, bookers that you had to deal with, where would Ole rank in that group?
Well, he would be, you know, at the top of it, but ours was it was a more personal.
Yeah.
You know, it was a personal relationship, you know, that you know, Vern owned the business. You know, Ole never really owned the business, but Vern owned the business. Shires owned the business. Eddie Graham owned the business. You know, and you could put him in the top category, but as a different individual, he's a little bit stiffer, a little more undiplomatic. You know, and as dictatorial as the others, but the others were a little bit, you know. Anyway.
Do you think if Ole Al Rogowski, if he hadn't left Vern, if he'd have stayed, would he have had the legacy that he does?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, Vern
wasn't going to put anybody over.
Vern. He owned the business. You know, Walter Carbo owned the business, and you know, you weren't going to get close to being on top of Vern in terms of that.
To your knowledge, did Vern ever try to get the three of you to come back together at all, or team at all? No. I used to think it was interesting when in the national wrestling magazines, the newsstand magazines, of course, Gene and Lars were always covered when you guys were down there in the South. But whenever Vern would put a picture or talk about you in the programs here, which he did from time to time in the printed programs, he always referred to you as, sometimes it was Lars Heinemi and Gene Anderson. He never said Gene and Lars Anderson. And I thought that was kind of weird that he wouldn't make the association up here. But of course, you were the Andersons down there.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's, those days before national television. So.
Oh yeah, and it was the time when we didn't know what was going on across the street, so they could pull anything off, anything in those days. Any other memories that you have of Ole that you want to share?
Not really, no. That sort of, sums it up. It turned out, in the end, to be a love, not a love-hate, but more. It was not the greatest of endings. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. The one thing that
I have to emphasize that I know exactly why he did the things he did.
Oh yeah.
Because he was running a business.
Yeah.
And I was like, they viewed me as some type of competition to the business because of the wrestling style. I mean, the T-shirt stores that I had, and
they were the shirt shacks. Is that what you call them?
Shirt shack, yeah.
Shirt shacks, yeah. Yeah.
They have
Now,
them all over the country.
I know when you were down south and with Gene, and I know when Ole was down there as well. We should point out that Buddy Wolf, Les Wolf, was also around that time with you guys.
Right.
Usually he was working babyface though.
Right. Yeah, I started him. We actually started him in Norfolk. He was playing, like minor league pro football and coaching.
Was it the Neptunes or something? The Norfolk Neptunes?
Yeah, exactly. And then coaching, at the high school there, and that's where he got his start. I started in, go up early to Norfolk and train him in the ring at the Coliseum there.
Well, I want to tell you this. As I look at the wrestling landscape from the mid-'60s, and actually we could go back even 5 years to 1961 or so, because that's when Gene started working for the AWA.
Right, yeah.
And he had gotten some training from Vern, and then he did assist Vern through the next 3 or 4 years when Vern would get a guy and try to bring him into the business, of course, in 65 when you came along. When I look at the landscape of wrestling from the mid-'60s up until about 1984, when the whole landscape changed with the national expansion and everything that took place with pay-per-views, etc. But if I eliminate the Anderson brothers, Gene, Lars, and Ole, and then later on we know Ole made a heck of a tag team with Arn Anderson, who was reported at times to be a nephew, and other times they even actually were billed as brothers in a couple of programs. I always thought Arn was a good addition. Marty Lundy is his name. But if we take out the Andersons out of that 20-year segment, I don't think wrestling was as exciting. You guys, you made it. You really did. And Ole was so important, whether he was Rock or whether he was Ole. And you, whatever role you were playing, if you were Heinemi or you were Lars Anderson, man, I tell you, it's a success story. It really is.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's fact. It comes from my heart. I loved you guys.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I got to ask one question. We talk about Ole Rock. There's been, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson,
right.
Rock, Don the Rock, Morocco. Was Ole the first Rock?
I don't
I
know if
think
they
he
called
was.
Don the Rock. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure he was actually.
Yeah,
There were a couple earlier years. I don't know, Lars or Larry, called you Lars. If you do you remember the wrestler Rock Hunter?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, Rock Hunter. He used the name Rock, obviously, before Ole did.
okay.
But I do point this out. Ole, when he was the Rock in the Twin Cities in his first year here, he started as Rock Rogowski, but then eventually he was just billed on cards as the Rock. I've got the programs to prove that. I've got publicity pictures to prove that. So, I think to answer the question, he was the original The Rock.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
I had
of
to get
course,
that.
Larry, you're familiar with Dwayne Johnson because you worked with, it's his mother you worked with, right?
His grandmother.
Grandmother, Leah.
And I were promoters in Hawaii.
Yeah.
He I've known him since he's about 10, 9, 10 years old.
Sure.
Like he would come in the wrestling office, like we had the belts, we kept the belts in the office, like he would come in, and reason being, like somebody would be working and put him over and they'd take the belt and they're gone. And then I got to buy another belt. So anyway, Dwayne would come in, Dewey would come in the office, and first thing he did was, get the belt, put the belt on, and flex around, flex around the house. He was going to be a champion, and he definitely came that.
That's funny.
Well, let me do this, Larry, before we finish up with you here. If speaking of Ole Anderson, if you were to share with us one good moment that you had with Ole through the years as you worked or wrestled or were around each other, is there something that would come to mind that is a good memory of him?
Well, I have a lot of good memories. We had a good time.
I like that.
Can't get into it totally, but we had a really good time.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, it's always sad. As a fan, I have seen all of the heroes that I loved as in the 60s and 70s and 80s. They're passing. I want you to be with us forever, my friend. So,
I intend. I'm shooting for 110. So
hey, I'm with you. And when you do it, we're going to have you on the show.
There you go.
I'll be 85 next month. So,
God bless you.
God
bless you.
Congrats.
Yeah, God bless you. I don't know if you were aware of this. I'll share this with you. I know we're talking about Ole here, but just a couple of weeks ago, we lost Chris Markoff.
Right.
Yeah.
And Chris, of course, I know you also worked around him in the AWA.
Right.
Definitely around the country, he had a stellar career, holding titles in Florida and Texas and a lot of tag teams, Bronco Lubitsch, Angelo Poffo, and others that he teamed with. So yeah. We need you guys to stick around, man.
Yeah.
Well, I plan to as long as possible.
There you go. George?
Let me thank you, Larry. Seriously.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The bottom of my heart. You came on impromptu this morning when we chatted in the text, and I love you for taking the time. I want you to know, and I know Brian will agree, you've got an open invitation. If you ever want to come and just talk old wrestling or share something, you've got an invitation. Let us know, and we'll have you on.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Larry, always a pleasure to have you on. You're such a, to me, underappreciated value to the pro wrestling during your era. I caught you at the latter part of your career, but I have nothing but great memories of you. You did a great job as a heel because I couldn't stand you, so you did your job well.
Thank you.
But again, I want to thank George Schire. I want to thank Luscious Lars Anderson, aka Larry Hanimi, for coming on today and remembering one of the greats, Ole Anderson, who passed away yesterday, February 26th, at the age of 81.
He definitely was one of the greats. Definitely.
One of the greats, and he will be missed. Larry, thanks again. George, thank you. Folks, if you're watching, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we will talk to you soon.